technological developments during the 50s and the 60s. The topics we are going to discuss about in this presentation will be telecommunications and new trends,
transport evolution,
aerospace sector.
During the 50s, there were a lot of new technological developments, such as valve radios, the transistor, solar cells, the pacemaker, first video games, the first microchip, and finally, last but not least, the television. Now, we will talk about those different topics, analyzing them step by step. Valve radios. One of the most important technological innovations of the 50s were valve radios. They were a particular kind of radios characterized by the use of miniature valves. Besides, they needed heavy batteries and certainly they could not be transportable. Due to this fact, in the 50s, valve radios became smaller and even portable, and more than this, there were small suitcases and handbags that contain a radio. Moreover, there were a lot of different models of radios, such as the Bosch MB60. In this case, to create this particular model was introduced the use of plastic in order to give it a more stylish design. The transistor. The transistor was invented in Bell Laboratories in the US in 1948 with the aim of producing a new kind of portable radio, but its potential was not fully realized until the 50s. It was a particular instrument capable of generating a potential difference between two electrodes. Thanks to this, it replaced the heavy batteries of valve radios. The first pocket transistor radio was marketed in the US in 1954. This model was called Regency Tier 1 and was manufactured by Texas Instruments. This new invention allowed people listening to music while they were moving. During the 50s, there were other important inventions. In 1954 was invented the solar cell. In 1958 were invented the first pacemaker, the first microchip, and the first video game. The television. The television was the marvel that transformed this period full of new technological trends. This new invention struggled to become a national mass media in the 50s and became a cultural force, for better or worse, in the 60s. Thanks to television, which was something that not every person could have, people found a way to spend their leisure time. From those years, a new dimension for people's life and conversation had begun. During the 60s, the United States experienced a great time of technological advances. Many of the inventions that were created in the 60s were developed through the 50s and even the 40s. Here are some of the most important inventions of the 60s. In 1963 was invented the video disc. In 1964, BASIC, an early computer language, was invented by John George Kameny and Tom Kurtz. In 1966 was invented the electronic fuel injection for cars. In 1967 was invented the first handheld calculator. In 1968 we have a lot of new inventions, like the computer mouse invented by Douglas Engelbart, the first computer with integrated circuits, the RAM invented by Robert Denard. In 1969 there were other inventions, such as the ARPANET, the first internet, the ATM, and the barcode scanner. The ARPANET. The most important invention of the 60s was surely the ARPANET. ARPANET was an invention of the US government during the Cold War. It was an underground network built to ensure communications between government and military organs of the United States of America. It revealed itself fundamental when Russia, during the Cold War, interrupted communications on the American soil, trying to attack it. ARPANET was developed under the direction of the US Advanced Research Project Agency, this is the acronym of ARPA, in 1967, and in 1969 the idea became a modest reality with the interconnection of 4 university computers. It allowed them to communicate each other, and for this reason it was called the first Internet.
Transport evolution. In these 2 decades, we have a technological development also in the transport industry. It increases its production in terms of low cost, efficiency, performance, utility and versatility. The aviation industry has developed also for military causes. Starting from aviation industry, due to Cold War and Berlin's division in East and West Berlin, NATO created the Berlin Airlift. It was necessary to provide food and medicines for West Berlin, and so airplanes had to be much faster and efficient. As a consequence, the turbojet engine has been introduced instead of the radial cylinder engine. The common turbojet engine is the oldest one in jet engine family. Its functioning consists in to carry air by a snorkel that makes the first air compression, to compress air a second time in other compressors, to fire compressed air with fuel spray by using a candle in the combustion chamber, and then eject exhaust gas through the nozzle. These steps enable a continuous airflow in the engine, and the combustion makes energy necessary for moving the turbines. External cold air cools the turbojet. Many airplanes with this engine in these years were in URSS the Tupolev Tu-104 for both military and public service. In USA, the Boeing 707 followed by the 727-737 models by Boeing Company, and the very first airliner with this engine was the British de Havilland DH-106 Comet. Then, moving on automotive industry, in the 50s and 60s we have an amazing development in this sector. The main factor is the beginning of Formula 1 World Championship in 1950. The 50s were the years of dinosaurs with anterior engine. The 60s were the British gold years. Also, we have a consistent development of highways infrastructures. For example, in December 1958 was born the first part of the Italian Autostrada del Sole, from Milan to Parma. So in this period we have many cars that are more efficient or suitable for any occasion, or cars more powerful. Even if the manufacturer was born in 1947, Ferrari began in 1950 its very famous production, and also, the same year, Ferrari took part to the first F1 World Championship. Technological developments in this period were about the engine, the coming of inject engines, the wheel traction and the aesthetics, cabriolet. So starting from the aesthetics, nice cars of the period were cabriolets with the removable roof. And with the F1 experience, there was the introduction of an inject engine that was able to fire combustible without using carburetors, and so to produce much power in a better way. With the F1 experience, so, rear-wheel drive was introduced in road cars. This system allows the car to use all the power more efficiently. Many famous cars in the 50s were Mercedes-Benz 300 SL, Alfa Romeo Giulia, Jeep Willys, Ferrari 250 GT California, Chevrolet Corvette, and the Fiat 500. '60s. This period was named the British Gold Age because dominated by 2 of the best pilots in the world, Jim Clark and Graham Hill, both British. Even more in Britain were born Lotus and Brabham Racing Organisation, 2 of the favorite teams in F1 those years. From this experience in F1, car chassis, engine and the practicality of the car were developed. So, we had a particular evolution of car chassis. There were small cars that copied the Fiat 500, and there were cars with more than 5 seats. Engines instead started to be positioned on the back. This meant more space for baggages and more stability. Also, engines become bigger in order to produce more power, or smaller but efficient in order to satisfy families' needs. And in Italy, a brand new car manufacturer was born, due to a failed collaboration with Ferrari. Ferruccio Lamborghini founded the automobile Lamborghini in 1963. Many famous cars in the 60s were the Mini Cooper, Volkswagen Van, hippie's favorite car with the 6th seat, Aston Martin DB5, Lamborghini Miura, the Ferrari 250 GTO and the Ford GT40.
Technological and scientific revolution in the space sector. Beginning of the war for space. From the Second World War until the end of 1960, we had the majority of flights and human explorations in space. In this period, URSS and USA challenged each other in the aerospace sector, with satellites and with the conquest of the moon. They tried to prevail over each other. First launch into space. The space race began with the launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik 1 on October 4, 1957. It was launched from the Soviet Union's Baikonur Cosmodrome. It reached a lower elliptical orbit as predicted. It remained in orbit for 3 weeks before its batteries ran out. Then it continued to orbit for other 2 months before its impact with the atmosphere that destroyed itself. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. October 1st, 1958, NASA has been founded. It was a new federal agency that operates in the aerospace sector. First man on the moon. Apollo 11 was the space mission that brought the first man to the moon, US astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, in July 20, 1969. Apollo 11 ended the space race undertaken by the United States and the Soviet Union. The first lunar walking was in live streaming on television for a worldwide audience. Other successes. For NASA. In 1959, the first meteorological satellite. In 1963, the first satellite for telecommunication in orbit. In 1965, the first close flyby of Mars, and in 1968, the first man in orbit around the Moon with Apollo 8. For URSS, in 1963, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshkova. In 1965, the first spacewalk with Voskhod 2, and in 1967, the first accident during a spaceflight due to a fault in opening its braking parachutes, Vladimir Komarov.
This is the end of our presentation. Thank you for the attention.